It was a quiet Thursday evening when I decided to surprise Rachel. She'd sent me a quick text that morning, "I'll be working late tonight." It wasn't unusual for her, given her demanding job at a tech firm. I'd gotten used to these late nights. But tonight, something in the tone of her message felt different. There was a distance to it that I couldn't quite explain. I'd never been the suspicious type. Rachel had always been the picture of ambition, someone I admired for her work ethic. But tonight, I felt this inexplicable urge to do something small, something unexpected. So, I decided to grab her favorite takeout and a bottle of wine we'd been saving for our anniversary, the one she insisted would be perfect for the right moment. I thought it could bring a smile to her face, a little gesture to brighten her evening. When I arrived at the building, the lobby was quiet, the hum of office lights in the background. The receptionist, Linda, gave me a smile as I walked past her desk. "Back again, Ethan? Another surprise for Rachel?" she asked. I forced a smile back, nodding. "Yeah, something like that." But as I walked toward the elevators, a strange feeling tugged at the back of my mind. Something just didn't feel right. The ride to the 18th floor seemed longer than usual. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the elevator doors. I had the food in my hand, the wine carefully wrapped, but there was this nagging sensation that I couldn't shake. Why was I feeling like this? Why now? As the elevator doors opened, I stepped into the hallway and walked toward Rachel's office. But then, something stopped me in my tracks. I heard muffled voices, and as I got closer, I froze. Through the frosted glass of her office door, I could see two shadows moving. At first, I thought maybe they were just talking too close to each other, but as I took a few more steps, the scene became clearer. Rachel was there, standing in front of her boss, James. They were kissing. My heart sank as I stood there, unable to move. The world outside the hallway seemed to disappear, and all that was left was this moment. The moment that would change everything. The food in my hand went cold. The bottle of wine meant to bring joy felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I turned away, my legs moving on their own as I walked back toward the elevator. My mind was numb. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. The elevator ride back down was silent, except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. By the time I reached the ground floor, the shaking in my hands had stopped, replaced by something colder, something sharper. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. But I knew one thing for certain. Everything had changed. I stepped out of the elevator, walking through the lobby like I was in a daze. Linda looked up from her desk, but I couldn't meet her eyes. "Have a good night, Ethan," she said as if nothing had happened. I nodded, barely acknowledging her, and walked out of the building. The night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it didn't feel real. I didn't know what was real anymore. I had come here to surprise my wife, to show her that I was thinking about her, but now I couldn't even understand the woman I had married. I drove home in silence, the weight of what I had just witnessed pressing down on me like a stone. I had no idea how to face Rachel or if I even wanted to. There was no plan in my head, just a sense of disbelief that this was my life now. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? When I got home, Rachel's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't inside yet. I stood in the living room, the cold takeout bag still in my hand, staring out the window. I had a choice to make now. I could confront her, demand answers, and let the anger out. Or I could wait. Watch. Gather evidence. Let her story unfold and reveal itself, piece by piece. I knew which path I was leaning toward. But I also knew that what came next would determine everything. The door opened and Rachel stepped inside, looking just like the woman I had married. Her makeup was perfect, her hairstyle just the way I liked it. She smiled as if nothing had changed, but I could see the flicker of hesitation in her eyes when she saw the cold takeout on the counter. "I thought you were working late," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. She looked at the food, then back at me, trying to mask her surprise with a smile. "I thought I'd be here later, but things wrapped up early. Looks like you were thinking about me." I didn't say anything in return. I just stood there, waiting for her to say more, hoping she would slip, hoping she would give me something that I could hold on to, something to explain what I had seen. But she didn't. She walked past me as if nothing had happened, and started making herself a cup of coffee. "I'll probably have to work late again tomorrow," she added casually. "It's been one of those weeks." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Big project coming up?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation normal, trying to keep the facade intact. "Yeah, the presentation is next week," she replied, not missing a beat. "James is pushing hard for the new proposal, so I've got to make sure everything is perfect." I couldn't help it. I clenched my fists at my sides. "James. The same man I'd seen with her just hours ago, tangled in a kiss. But I didn't react. I didn't confront her then. Instead, I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, and left the house. I needed time. Time to think. Time to figure out what I was going to do next. Rachel didn't even notice I had left. She didn't even care. The silence in the house felt oppressive, heavier than it had ever been before. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still swirling with everything I had seen. The night before, after I left, I drove aimlessly around the city, my thoughts racing. How could this have happened? Was it a one-time mistake? Or was this the culmination of something much deeper? I couldn't stop replaying that moment in the hallway, the cold realization that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was built on lies. But the morning light didn't bring clarity. Instead, it was like a fog had settled over everything. I tried to focus on the usual morning routine, brewing coffee, picking out my clothes for work, but my mind kept wandering back to Rachel and James. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Something had been off for a long time. There were cracks I had ignored, signs I had overlooked. As I walked into the kitchen, Rachel was already there, wearing a new blouse, cream-colored, elegant, like she had just stepped out of a magazine ad. She had her hair styled perfectly, her makeup sharp, almost like she had put in extra effort this morning. I couldn't help but notice the little details. The fragrance of her perfume was heavier than usual, and her movements were a bit too careful. She poured herself a cup of coffee, avoiding eye contact with me just like the night before. "Big presentation today?" I asked casually, trying to keep the conversation light. She hesitated for a moment before replying. "Yeah. James wants to restructure the numbers. It's been a crazy week." Her tone was flat, almost robotic. "That sounds intense," I replied, watching her carefully. The way she held her coffee mug, the way she avoided looking me in the eyes, all felt wrong. But I couldn't pinpoint why. Something was off and I needed to know what it was. She didn't stay long, giving me a quick peck on the cheek as she grabbed her bag and rushed out the door. The sound of the car driving away felt oddly final, like she was running from something. Maybe from me, maybe from the truth. I stood there in the kitchen for a while, the coffee cooling in front of me. The life I thought I had was slipping through my fingers and I didn't know what to do next. I could confront her, demand answers, but I wasn't ready for that. I needed proof. I needed to see the patterns, to make sense of the pieces I'd been handed. I decided to call Hank. He was the one person who knew me well enough to understand when I was at my breaking point. We'd been friends for years and he had seen me at my worst. He picked up on the second ring, his voice crackling with the sound of background noise from what I guessed was his usual spot at the bar. "Carson, you never call me this early. What's going on?" he asked, sensing something was wrong. I took a deep breath. "It's Rachel. Something's not right. I think she's hiding something. I don't know what to do about it." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear Hank exhale. He was no stranger to the chaos of relationships. "You think she's cheating?" he asked bluntly. That question hit me like a punch in the stomach. I hadn't been willing to admit it out loud, but now that he said it, I felt the truth crawl up my throat. "Yeah. I think she is," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Hank was silent for a moment before responding. "So, what are you going to do about it?" I took a deep breath and looked out the window as if I could find the answer there. "I'm going to find out for sure. No guessing. No assumptions. Just the truth." After hanging up, I felt the weight of my own decision settle on my shoulders. There would be no going back now. I had to face what I was about to uncover, no matter how much it hurt. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. Rachel had texted me again, saying she'd be working late. This time, I wasn't going to sit at home waiting for her to return. I was going to see for myself. I waited until late afternoon, then grabbed my keys, slipping out of the house without a word. No more surprises for her, no more pretense. I wasn't bringing dinner this time, wasn't going to show up with any false hopes of rekindling what we once had. This was about something else now. I needed answers. When I arrived at the office building, I felt the same unease I had the night before, but this time it was worse. I had a feeling in my gut, anxiety, anger, fear, all bundled into one. The receptionist, Linda, smiled at me as I walked past her desk, but her smile didn't seem as warm as it usually did. It was like she knew something I didn't, like she could sense the shift in the air. "Back again, Ethan?" she asked, but there was something different in her tone, something softer, like she was pitying me. I nodded stiffly. "Yeah. Just a quick surprise for Rachel." She nodded, but I could see the flicker of something behind her eyes, something she wasn't saying. I tried to shake it off as I made my way toward the elevator. The ride to the 18th floor was even slower this time. The silence felt suffocating. The ding of the elevator felt like an announcement. This was it, no turning back. I stepped off the elevator, my heart racing, and began walking toward Rachel's office. The hallway was empty, the lights overhead buzzing faintly. I could feel the air growing heavier with every step. And then, just like the night before, I saw them. Through the frosted glass, their shapes blurred but unmistakable. Rachel and James. They were in the same position as before, their bodies entwined in a way that left no room for doubt. My stomach dropped and I felt the heat of anger rise in my chest. But I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just turned around and walked back toward the elevator. I had what I needed. I didn't need to confront them. Not yet. I didn't speak to Linda as I passed the reception desk again, but I could feel her eyes on me. Her pity was almost tangible. It didn't matter. I had already made my decision. I was done pretending. I was done being the clueless husband. I took the elevator down in silence, and when the doors opened I stepped out, the weight of what I had just witnessed settling into my bones. This was no longer a marriage. It was a waiting game, and I was about to play it smarter than I ever had before. Rachel wouldn't know it yet, but her world was about to change. The next morning the routine felt the same, but I couldn't shake the heaviness that clung to me like a second skin. Rachel was in the kitchen, looking as poised as ever, making her usual coffee. Her routine, her smile, her quick kiss on the cheek before leaving, none of it felt real anymore. How had she managed to live this double life without me knowing? Or was I just too blind to see the signs? I tried to focus on my work. I sat at my desk, papers in front of me, but the numbers on the spreadsheet blurred into meaningless lines. All I could think about was Rachel, the office, James. I'd seen enough. I knew enough. But I needed to be sure. I needed something more, something concrete that I could use. That afternoon I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Rachel to slip up again. I was going to act. If I wanted to know the truth, I needed to take control. So, I did what any man would do when his world is coming apart at the seams. I called in a professional. A private investigator. His name was Simon, and when I met him at a small cafe later that day, I tried not to let my desperation show. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, wore a dark suit, his eyes sharp with the kind of focus that came from years of watching people's lives unravel. He didn't ask many questions. I told him I needed to confirm something about my wife. I didn't go into the specifics. Simon didn't need to know the details yet. I'll have my guy follow her for a few days, get a sense of her schedule. We'll see what's going on, Simon said, his voice calm, almost detached. I nodded, trying to ignore the feeling in my gut that told me this was just the beginning. It was one thing to know something wasn't right, but it was another to have it confirmed by someone who could get the evidence. I wasn't sure what I was expecting Simon to find, but deep down I knew it wouldn't be good. The following days felt like they were dragging on in slow motion. I could barely concentrate at work, constantly looking at my phone, waiting for a message from Simon. Meanwhile, Rachel continued with her routine. Her late nights had become more frequent, her excuses more polished. She didn't seem to notice the growing distance between us, or maybe she just didn't care. Then one afternoon I received a message from Simon. It was simple. She's been meeting him every Thursday night for the last month. Same hotel. I got photos. I'll send them soon. The message hit me like a punch in the stomach. I didn't need to see the photos. I already knew the truth. But seeing the words, same hotel every Thursday night, made it all feel real. There were no more doubts. No more wondering. Rachel had been lying to me for months. And James wasn't just some coworker. He was her partner in more than just business. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the screen, the reality of the situation sinking in. My marriage was a lie. I'd been living in a house of mirrors, seeing only what Rachel wanted me to see, and now the walls were coming down. When Rachel came home that night, she was more distant than usual. There was no apology, no explanation. She had no idea I knew. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, setting her bag on the counter. "Big week ahead. I'll probably be working late again tomorrow." I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there watching her, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wasn't going to yell, wasn't going to make a scene. I had a plan now, and it didn't involve confronting her yet. It involved waiting. I spent the next few hours in silence, doing my best to keep calm. But the truth was gnawing at me. I had a feeling that once I spoke to Rachel, once I told her what I knew, everything would change. But how could I even begin? How could I confront her when she had been so careful with her lies? Later that night, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, looking at the pictures Simon had sent me. It was Rachel and James, together, smiling, holding hands outside a hotel. The pictures were clear. There was no mistaking what I was looking at. And as much as I hated to admit it, I couldn't stop staring at them. It was like watching my life unravel before my eyes. When Rachel finally came to bed, I turned off the lights, trying to feign sleep. She snuggled up next to me, her head resting on my chest, but it felt wrong. It didn't feel like it used to. I couldn't bring myself to touch her, couldn't pretend like everything was fine. How could I? I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but inside I was planning. I was going to get the answers I needed, and then I was going to end this. My marriage, my life, everything, it was all built on lies, and now the truth was coming out. The next morning, Rachel was up before me, already dressed in another new outfit. She was perfect like always, but I couldn't look at her the same way. She kissed me goodbye before heading out the door, and I didn't say anything. I just watched her go. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew this: nothing would be the same. The following days were a blur, a strange limbo where I was neither here nor there, caught between the life I thought I had and the painful truth I was now living. Every time I saw Rachel, my mind couldn't stop running the tapes from the past. The way she'd smile at me with those perfect teeth, the way she'd pretend everything was fine while I silently counted the cracks in our marriage. I'd called Simon again, asking for more surveillance. I needed more proof, something airtight, something that would leave no room for denial. He didn't ask questions, he just told me he'd keep his eyes on Rachel. The nights grew colder, and with each one my resolve hardened. I was waiting for the right moment, the right time to finally confront her. I had to be strategic. I couldn't let her twist the narrative. I couldn't let her make me the bad guy in a story she'd created. Rachel came home late again that Friday. I could hear the faint sound of her car pulling into the driveway as I sat in the living room, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. The silence in the house had become suffocating, each tick of the clock louder than the last. She walked through the door looking exactly the same as always. Her hair was perfect, her blouse crisp and new. But there was something in the air tonight, something heavier that neither of us could ignore. I had the evidence. I had seen the photos, heard the stories, felt the distance. But now I had to confront her. She walked into the kitchen, throwing her bag on the counter, giving me a quick smile. "Hey, sorry I'm late." "Another late night with the project," she said, as if it was all so routine. As if I wasn't sitting here with everything changed between us. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to react impulsively. Instead, I watched her, my heart heavy, my mind racing with 100 different thoughts. I could feel the anger building, but I kept it in check. No more outbursts, no more losing control. This wasn't about that anymore. It was about getting to the truth. "Rachel," I said finally, my voice calm but firm, "I know what's been going on." She froze, her back to me as she reached for the fridge. The moments stretched out, the silence between us growing thick. Then she turned, her face momentarily blank before a practiced smile formed. "What do you mean?" Her voice was light, almost dismissive, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, fear, confusion, or maybe guilt. I couldn't tell which. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone and handed it to her. The images from Simon's surveillance were on the screen. The first shot was Rachel and James together outside the hotel, hand in hand. The next was them entering the building. The next showed them in the hotel room, their backs turned, but the intimacy between them undeniable. Rachel stared at the photos in silence. The color drained from her face, and her lips pressed into a tight line. I could see the gears turning in her head, as if she were trying to come up with a reasonable explanation, a story to save herself. "Carson, listen," she began, but I cut her off. "No. I've seen enough. I know what's going on." I felt the flood of emotions well up inside me, anger, hurt, betrayal, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her manipulate me again. She was caught and she knew it. Rachel looked down at the photos, her face pale. "It's not what you think," she said, but her voice wavered. "Then what is it?" I asked, my voice low and steady, but the words felt heavy in my chest. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around behind my back, meeting him, sleeping with him. And you've been doing it all while pretending like everything's fine at home." Her breath hitched and she took a step back, trying to gather herself. "I didn't mean for it to happen. James and I, we got closer over time. And I didn't know how to stop it. It's not just about the physical stuff, Carson, he understands me in a way you don't anymore. He gets me. I was feeling lost and he was there for me." I shook my head slowly, the betrayal cutting deeper than I could have imagined. "So that's your excuse? You felt lost, so you decided to throw away everything we had." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. There was nothing left for her to say that would make it okay. It wasn't just the affair, it was the deception, the lies that had built up over time. I had tried to ignore the small cracks in our marriage, the way she became distant, the late nights, the excuses, but now it was all clear. The woman I had married wasn't the woman standing in front of me. I felt sick to my stomach, but I wasn't going to let her see it. I didn't want her to have the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I had already started planning. I would get my life back piece by piece, and I would do it on my terms. What now? I asked, staring her down. What do you want me to say, Rachel? Do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to pretend like this is just some mistake? She shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear. No, Carson. I don't want you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. The words hit me like a slap. I had been waiting for her to own up to it, but hearing it out loud somehow made everything feel final. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was who she had chosen to be. I don't know what you expect me to do now, she continued, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, my mind still processing everything. I need space. I need time to think, I said, my back to her as I reached for my jacket. Rachel didn't try to stop me. She knew it was over. So did I. I stepped outside into the cold night air, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The truth was out, but there was still so much left to deal with, so much left to figure out. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear. My marriage was over. And I was just getting started. The days after that conversation felt like a blur of emotions, but mostly numbness. Rachel tried to reach out, texts, calls, the occasional email, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her messages, I felt the anger bubbling up again, the raw hurt of betrayal. I didn't want to talk, didn't want to explain myself. I knew what I had to do. And that meant taking control of the situation, starting with getting myself prepared. I reached out to a lawyer. A friend of a friend, someone who could help me understand what the next steps would look like. I didn't want to divorce Rachel, not at first. It wasn't just about the affair, it was the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for everything we'd built. But I wasn't naive either. I knew this would get ugly, and I needed to be ready for what came next. Simon, the private investigator, called me 2 days later. He had more information for me, details about Rachel's relationship with James that I hadn't even thought to ask about. They had been meeting not just at hotels but also at upscale restaurants, charging company expenses to cover their dates. The hotel receipts had been under Rachel's name, but they'd used the company credit card to pay for the meals. The more I learned, the more I realized how deep the betrayal went. This wasn't just an affair, it was a carefully orchestrated series of lies. Rachel came home that Friday night the same as before, but this time I was prepared. I knew what I was going to do. I had been thinking about it all week. I was done pretending that nothing was wrong. Done pretending that we could just move on. As she walked through the door, her eyes immediately searched for me. She didn't speak at first, just stood there waiting for me to say something. Her face was pale, tired. But there was a guarded look in her eyes, like she knew I had been avoiding her for days, like she knew what was coming. I didn't waste time. I motioned for her to sit down. She hesitated but complied. I wasn't going to drag this out any longer. I had to speak the truth. I've been thinking a lot about everything you've done, I said, keeping my voice steady, almost cold. About the affair, about the lies, about everything you've kept hidden from me. And you know what? I'm done. I'm done with all of it. Her eyes widened and she opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. No, I said, my voice firmer this time. You've had plenty of chances to come clean. I've been sitting here letting you weave your stories, letting you make excuses. But I know everything now. The hotel receipts, the dinners, the company credit card charges, the texts you thought I'd never find. It's all here, Rachel. I know exactly what you've been doing. I've got the evidence. I've been watching. I could see the panic in her eyes now, the realization that there was no escaping the truth. But she still tried to fight it, still tried to manipulate the situation. Carson, please, let me explain, she begged, her voice cracking. It wasn't just about the affair. It's about how we've been growing apart. I was lonely. James, he understood me. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want any of this. I shook my head slowly. You had every opportunity to talk to me. But instead of coming to me, you chose to hide behind your lies. You chose to betray me. I've given you everything, Rachel. And this is how you repay me. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. I saw her shoulders slump, the weight of the truth finally sinking in. I wasn't sure what I expected from her, apology, guilt, remorse, but it was too late. The trust had been shattered and nothing would ever fix that. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, her voice small, defeated. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to end this," I said without hesitation. "I've already started the process. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to keep living this lie. It's over, Rachel. You chose this. Now I have to choose myself." Her face contorted with shock, and for a brief moment I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She stood up quickly, her hands shaking as she wiped her face. She didn't say anything else. Just turned and walked toward the door. "Wait, Carson," she called back, but I didn't turn to face her. I could hear her footsteps retreating, the front door opening and closing softly. And just like that she was gone. The finality of it hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I was still processing it all. This wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. The next few days were a blur of legal documents, phone calls with the lawyer, and endless thoughts about how I had gotten here. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. Now I just felt empty. It wasn't until I went through the motions of packing up Rachel's things, removing the clothes from the closet, sorting through the books and trinkets in the living room, that I started to feel the sting of reality. It wasn't the pain of betrayal anymore, it was the loss of something I had once cherished. By the time the weekend rolled around, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to sit around and wallow in the wreckage of my marriage. I was done with the past. I needed to move forward. I called Hank, asked if he wanted to grab a drink. He could tell from my voice that I was finally ready to talk. When we met at the bar, I told him everything, about Rachel, about the affair, about the divorce. Hank didn't say much. He just listened, nodding occasionally, letting me get it all out. "You know, Carson," he said after a long silence, "you're doing the right thing. You can't fix something that's been broken beyond repair. I've seen you at your worst, and trust me, you're not there anymore. You're better than this. Better than her." I didn't know if I believed it, but I appreciated his words. And for the first time in a while, I started to feel like maybe I could be okay. I wasn't sure when things would get better or what my life would look like in the future, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the victim. It was time to rebuild. "To new beginnings," Hank said, raising his glass. I clinked my glass against his, even though I didn't quite feel like celebrating yet. But it was a start. And sometimes that's all you need to begin again. The days after Rachel left were strange. I expected the emptiness to hit me like a wave, but instead there was just silence. The house, once filled with the buzz of her presence, felt hollow. The room seemed bigger somehow, the walls too silent. At first I thought I'd feel relief, but there was something unsettling about the quiet that followed the storm. I spent the first few nights alone, just sitting on the couch in the living room, staring at the TV but not really watching. I had all the time in the world to think, but the thoughts didn't come in a neat, organized fashion. There were moments of clarity, then moments where everything felt like a blur. I kept telling myself it was for the best, that this was the right thing to do. But it didn't stop the waves of doubt that would hit when I was alone in the dark. I called Hank again the following week, needing to talk, needing to hear someone else's voice in the midst of this silence. "You doing all right, man?" he asked, his voice calm but concerned. I ran a hand through my hair. "Yeah, I guess. It's just weird. I thought I'd feel something more, anger maybe, but mostly it's just this emptiness. I don't know what's next." "It's gonna take time, you know," Hank said. "You just gave yourself some space to breathe. But don't rush it. You don't have to have all the answers right now." I nodded, even though I knew he couldn't see me. He was right. There was no rush to heal, no timeline to follow. I'd spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to keep everything together, that I had forgotten what it was like to just breathe. The next few weeks felt like a slow march toward normalcy. I threw myself into work, focusing on the things that still made sense. Numbers, deadlines, reports. But there were moments like when I came home late and the house was too quiet, when I remembered the life I had with Rachel. I remembered the plans we'd made, the promises we'd shared. I didn't miss her, not exactly, but I missed the idea of her. The version of her that I had built in my mind before the lies and deceit shattered everything. A few weeks after Rachel left, I finally signed the divorce papers. There was no turning back. It was done. But even as I signed, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about her. It was about me too. The version of me that had been living in a fog for years, the version of me that had settled for less than what I deserved. I had spent so much time being the person I thought Rachel needed me to be, that I had forgotten who I really was. One evening, after another long day at work, I found myself walking down to the local park. The sun was setting, casting a soft orange glow over everything. I sat on one of the benches and just watched the world go by, letting the calm of the moment wash over me. There was a peace in the solitude, a stillness that I hadn't felt in years. I thought about everything that had happened, the affair, the lies, the divorce, and I realized something. I wasn't the man I used to be, and that was okay. I had been broken, but now I was starting to rebuild. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone else define who I was. I wasn't going to let anyone else decide my worth. I was going to find my own way on my own terms. The weeks turned into months. The pain softened, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I moved out of the house we had shared, finding a small apartment in the city, just enough space for me to start fresh. I got back into the hobbies I had abandoned, reading, cooking, even taking up jogging again. I hadn't realized how much I had neglected myself in the years I had been married. And then one day I ran into her. I was at a coffee shop, sitting by the window, lost in a book, when I heard the familiar sound of someone walking past. My head snapped up, and there she was, Rachel. She hadn't changed much, still looking polished and put together, her hair styled the way it used to be. She was with a group of people, laughing, the same carefree smile she had always worn. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she stopped. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two strangers with a history neither could ignore. The silence between us was thick, almost suffocating. She opened her mouth to say something, but I stopped her with a small shake of my head. "Don't," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with something I couldn't place. Regret, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of everything that had passed between us. She didn't say anything more. She just turned, joining her group as they walked out of the coffee shop. I sat there for a moment, watching her go. The past suddenly felt so far away, like it belonged to a different life, a different version of me. The anger was gone now, replaced by a strange sense of closure. I had done what I needed to do. I had faced the truth and walked away from the wreckage. I was no longer a man defined by his marriage, by Rachel, by the lies. I was Ethan again, the man who could breathe again, the man who had chosen himself, the man who was ready for whatever came next. And that was enough. The next few months passed quietly, with life slowly returning to a rhythm I hadn't known in years. The early days of being on my own were challenging, to say the least. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom place in the heart of the city, but it was mine. I made it my sanctuary, filling it with little things that made me feel at home. Bookshelves with my favorite novels, a comfortable chair by the window, and, for the first time in a long time, the absence of anyone else's expectations. There was no one telling me when to come home or where to go. There were no more lies, no more uncertainty. Just peace. Work became a comfort again. I threw myself into projects, diving into my responsibilities with a focus I hadn't had in years. The work wasn't just a distraction. It became a way to rebuild my self-worth. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Rachel or what had gone wrong. I was thinking about the present, about the person I was becoming. I didn't need to hold on to the past anymore. It didn't define me. I started dating again too, though cautiously. I met a woman named Emily at a bookshop one weekend. She was independent, bright, and passionate about everything she did. We shared the same love for old novels and often spent hours at the coffee shop talking about our favorite books and debating literary themes. Emily didn't rush things. She didn't push for more than I was ready to give, which was a relief. She let me be myself, no expectations, no pressure. We saw each other casually for a few months and it felt good. It felt right. But more than that, it was a reminder that there was life after the storm, that I wasn't alone in the world. Still, there were moments when the weight of what I had been through hit me unexpectedly. A song on the radio, a street we used to walk down together, a sudden memory of Rachel laughing, and I'd be thrown back into the past. But I had learned to live with those moments. I had learned that they didn't have to hurt. I could embrace them without letting them define me. One evening, I went to Hank's bar after a long week at work, needing some time to clear my head. Hank was there, of course, sitting at his usual stool with a beer in hand, just as he always was. "Well, look who's finally showing up," he said with a grin. "I thought you were too busy being all grown up and healed to come by." I chuckled and sat next to him, ordering my usual. "It's a work in progress," I replied, taking a long sip of my drink. "But yeah, I guess I'm getting there." Hank leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You know, Carson," he said, using my real name for the first time in ages, "I can't say I didn't see this coming. You've always had a head on your shoulders. But, man, I gotta say, watching you go through all that, it was rough. I'm glad to see you pulling through." I looked at Hank, grateful for his quiet support, even when I hadn't known what I needed. I didn't think I would, you know? I said, a little more vulnerable than I meant to be. There were days when I didn't know how I'd make it out of it. But somehow I did. Somehow I'm here. And it feels different this time. Hank clinked his bottle against mine. I knew you would. You're a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for, man. I smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth in my chest. The truth was, I didn't know how strong I was either until I had no choice but to be. It wasn't just about surviving what Rachel had put me through. It was about choosing to live again, choosing to find myself again, even when everything felt shattered. As the weeks continued to pass, the rhythm of my new life settled into place. I found myself spending more time with friends, reconnecting with family members I had neglected, and even taking spontaneous trips to places I had always wanted to visit. The world suddenly felt full of possibilities again. It wasn't a new beginning in the way I had once imagined it, but it was a new chapter nonetheless. A chapter where I was in control, a chapter where I didn't have to sacrifice who I was for anyone else. One morning, about 6 months after Rachel left, I found myself standing in front of the window in my apartment, watching the city wake up. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the skyline. I couldn't help but smile. The old version of me would have been terrified of this moment, the uncertainty, the change. But now it felt freeing. There was no more fear. Only possibility. I thought about Rachel, about the life we had shared, the promises we had made, and everything that had come to an end. But I also thought about how much I had learned, about what I was capable of, about the life I was building. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was mine. And I was learning to embrace it. For the first time in a long time, I was happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was choosing to move forward, to let go of the past and create something new. The truth had set me free, not just from Rachel but from the version of myself that I had outgrown. I wasn't who I used to be. I was someone new, someone stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was a Friday evening when I decided to attend a small get-together at Hank's suggestion. He'd been urging me to get back into socializing outside of work, to stop hiding behind the walls I'd built for myself. So, when he mentioned a casual meetup at a local bar with some of his old friends, I figured it might do me some good to get out for a bit. I had been fine on my own for months, but maybe it was time to stop playing it safe. The bar was lively when I walked in, filled with the usual crowd. The hum of conversation and laughter surrounded me, but there was a strange comfort in it. I made my way to Hank's usual spot at the back corner by the jukebox and sat down. "You look like a man who's gotten his life back together," Hank said with a wide grin, handing me a beer. I laughed, taking the bottle from him. "I'm getting there. Slowly." The night went by easily. We joked, caught up on life and shared stories, most of them silly, a few of them meaningful. I hadn't realized how much I had missed the simple act of just being around friends, being myself without the heavy weight of the past constantly lingering. I let the music wash over me, tapping my foot to the rhythm, enjoying the rare sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. Around midnight I stepped out for a breath of fresh air. The night was crisp, the city lights shimmering as I walked down the street toward the small park nearby. It felt good to be out, to feel like I was part of the world again, not just a bystander in my own life. As I walked through the park, I saw a figure sitting on one of the benches, gazing at the city skyline. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I got closer I froze. It was Rachel. She was sitting there alone, her back straight, looking lost in thought. Her blonde hair shone faintly in the dim light, and she was wearing a coat I didn't recognize. I hadn't seen her in months, not in person anyway. She'd reached out a few times, sending occasional texts, but I had ignored them. The divorce was finalized, and as far as I was concerned, she was part of a past that no longer had a place in my life. But seeing her there, in the middle of the park, hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I could feel my heart race, my body tense, but I didn't turn away. Instead, I approached slowly, each step heavier than the last. She didn't see me coming, but when I stood in front of her, she looked up with wide eyes, a hint of surprise flashing across her face. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice soft, almost unsure. I stood there for a moment, just looking at her. She had changed, I realized. She looked different, tired, maybe, or just not the same person she had been when we were married. There was no makeup on her face, and she seemed smaller, like the weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on her. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. I didn't mean to sound harsh, but I wasn't sure how else to react. She hesitated before answering. I needed to think. "I don't really know why I came here. It just felt like the right place." I glanced around the park, wondering if she had been waiting for me to show up. It seemed too coincidental, too unreal. But then again, maybe that was just the way things went now. No one had clear answers to anything anymore. I didn't expect to see you, she said, her eyes searching mine for something. I don't know what I thought. Maybe that you would never want to see me again. I looked at her for a long moment, trying to find the right words. Part of me wanted to walk away to keep the distance I had fought so hard to maintain. But another part of me wanted closure, wanted to know how she saw everything now, wanted to understand why she did what she did. Why now, Rachel? I asked. What do you want from me? Her eyes dropped to her hands and I could see her trembling slightly. It was almost as if the walls she had built around herself were crumbling in front of me. I don't know, she said, her voice shaky. I've been trying to fix things in my life, trying to make sense of what happened, and I keep coming back to you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Her words hit me like a rush of cold air, but there was no anger in me anymore. I wasn't angry at Rachel. I didn't know what I felt. It had taken me months to come to terms with everything she had done, and as much as I wanted to say something bitter or cutting, I realized it would serve no purpose. I appreciate the apology, I said, finally sitting down beside her. But that doesn't change what happened. You hurt me, Rachel. And I can't just forget that. She nodded, her face crumpling as though she were trying to hold back tears. I know. I don't expect you to. We sat there in silence for a long time, neither of us speaking. The city sounds around us were distant, like we were in our own little bubble, separated from everything else. I didn't know what was going through her mind, but I could feel her regret, her pain. I had moved on, at least I had thought I had. But seeing her now, hearing the vulnerability in her voice, brought up memories I had tried to bury. The truth was, I still cared about her, despite everything that had happened. I can't go back to what we were, Rachel, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But I hope you find a way to move forward, to make things right for yourself. Because I'm doing that. I'm moving forward. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face. I understand, she said softly. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'll always care about you. I stood up, brushing off the seat of my jeans. Take care of yourself, Rachel. And with that, I turned and walked away. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no resolution. Just the quiet understanding that we had both changed, that we had both been through things we could never undo. But that didn't mean we couldn't keep moving forward. I didn't look back as I left the park. I didn't need to. I was done with the past. It was time to keep building the life I wanted for myself, one step at a time. The encounter with Rachel, though brief, marked a turning point. It wasn't a grand revelation, nor was it a dramatic closure. It was just two people who once meant everything to each other, coming face to face after a storm had torn apart what they once had. We both left the park that night with more questions than answers, but somehow, there was a sense of peace that followed. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about that moment more than I expected. Rachel's apology, her vulnerability, it lingered in my mind. I wondered if, deep down, she had been telling herself the same thing I had been telling myself for months, that it was over. That we were both trying to move on, trying to rebuild our lives, even though our past still hovered like a shadow. But I knew one thing for sure, I was done with the past. Whatever Rachel and I had, whatever we had tried to build, was no longer mine to fix. The divorce had closed that chapter. I had closed that chapter. And now it was time to focus on the future. Over the next few weeks, I focused even more on myself. I took long walks in the mornings, read books I had always wanted to finish, and spent time doing the things I had pushed aside during my marriage. I even went back to writing, something I hadn't done since I was in college. I had always loved writing, but somewhere along the way, it had become one of those things that was just forgotten. Now, I found myself pouring my thoughts onto paper, letting my pen move freely, not worried about the end result, but about the process itself. I also started working on myself physically. It wasn't about getting in shape for anyone else. It was about rediscovering my own strength. I took up boxing, something I had always been interested in but never made time for. The workouts were intense, but they gave me a sense of clarity, an energy I hadn't felt in years. Every punch I threw, every drop of sweat that dripped from my face, reminded me that I was still capable of rebuilding, not just my life but myself. And of course there was Emily. She and I had continued seeing each other casually. I liked her. I really did. She was kind, supportive, and funny in ways that made me feel like I could just be myself. We didn't rush anything. We went on a few hikes, saw a couple of movies, and spent lazy Sunday mornings at cafes. With Emily there was no pressure, no expectations. She made it easy to just be. And for the first time in a while, I realized that I was beginning to trust again, not just her but myself. I wasn't sure where it would go, but I wasn't in any rush. For once, I was taking things one step at a time. Then one Saturday evening, something unexpected happened. I was at the local farmer's market, picking up some fresh vegetables for dinner when I saw a familiar face. It was Hank, waving enthusiastically from across the street. He had that grin on his face, the one that meant he was up to something. I waved back and he jogged over looking excited. "Hey you. Just the guy I wanted to see," Hank said, out of breath. "How's life treating you? Been hitting the gym, I see." I laughed, brushing the sweat off my forehead. "It's going well. Just trying to keep moving forward, you know?" Good. "Well, I've got some news for you. Something big." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's going on?" Hank leaned in, lowering his voice as if he were about to share a secret. "I know you've been seeing Emily. And I've got to say she's a great match for you, man. But I've also got a little surprise for you." I was confused. "What do you mean?" "I ran into your old buddy James the other day. You know, the guy from work who, well, you know. He was asking about you." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from James in months. Since the divorce, I had distanced myself from anyone remotely connected to that part of my life. The thought of him made me uneasy. What did he want? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, though my pulse quickened. Hank shrugged, a smirk on his face. "He wanted to apologize, man. And I'm not saying you should go running back to him or anything, but I figured you should know. He's been kind of remorseful about everything that went down. I'm just the messenger, but he's been trying to reach out." I stood there for a moment, processing what Hank had said. The idea of James apologizing, it didn't sit well with me. I didn't know if I was ready for that or if I ever would be. But there was something about the way Hank spoke, something genuine in his voice that made me think about it. "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly. "But I think I'm okay. I'm not sure I'm ready for any kind of reconciliation with him. Not yet." Hank nodded, understanding. "I get it, man. Just wanted you to know he's trying. And that you've got some people who care about you in case you forgot." I smiled, appreciating his support. "Thanks, Hank. I really mean it." As I walked away from the market that day, I couldn't help but feel like I was on the cusp of something new. The past was still there, hovering in the background, but I was starting to realize that it didn't have to define me. I had the power to choose what came next. Whether it was Emily, whether it was healing old wounds with James, or whether it was simply continuing to build the life I had always wanted, I knew that I was ready to face whatever came my way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of calm certainty. The road ahead was mine to take. Weeks went by and life started to feel normal. It wasn't the kind of normal I had imagined all those months ago when I first decided to take control of my life. No, it was better than that. It was my normal, one that was uniquely mine, shaped by the choices I had made, the lessons I had learned, and the things I had let go of. I kept seeing Emily, but at a pace that felt right. We had our moments, simple things like sharing a pizza on a Friday night or strolling through the park, talking about nothing and everything. There was an easy comfort between us. I didn't feel the need to rush into anything. It was nice. But even as we spent more time together, there was a quiet understanding that both of us were still learning how to navigate the space between us. Neither of us had been perfect in our past relationships, and we both carried scars from what we had been through. But it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a shared understanding. One evening, about a month after my unexpected encounter with Rachel, I found myself sitting in my small living room, flipping through an old photo album I'd kept hidden in a box. It was a box full of memories from a time before everything changed. The vacations Rachel and I had taken, family photos, the pictures from our wedding day. I hadn't wanted to look at them in a long time, but tonight something made me pull the box out. As I flipped through the album, each photo stirred up a mix of emotions. Happiness, sadness, regret. But most of all, I felt a deep sense of closure. I didn't need to carry these memories with me anymore. I didn't need them to define who I was. I had my own story now, one that was still being written. I set the album down on the coffee table, running my fingers over the cover as if I were saying goodbye to something that had once meant everything. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about releasing. Letting go of the past so I could move forward into the future. The phone buzzed on the table next to me, interrupting my thoughts. It was a text from Emily. "Hey, I know this might be a bit random, but I was thinking about taking a trip this summer. Just a short getaway. What do you think? Are you up for it?" A smile tugged at my lips. A trip. A fresh start. I had been too afraid of moving on before, but now I was learning that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant embracing the new experiences, the new opportunities, the new people that life had to offer. I quickly typed a response. That sounds amazing. Where were you thinking? Her reply came almost immediately. Maybe somewhere quiet, a little retreat by the beach. I think it'd be nice to just get away and relax for a few days. I thought about it for a second. A retreat. A beach. Quiet. It felt right. It felt like the kind of step I needed to take. I'm in, I typed back. Let's do it. I put the phone down and leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes for a moment. The weight that had once felt so heavy on my chest seemed to lift. The past, with all its hurt and disappointment, had finally been put to rest. Now, there was only the present, the only place that truly mattered. I knew it wouldn't always be easy. Life never is. But the difference now was that I was ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready to face the unknown with a sense of self that I hadn't known I had. The wounds were healing. The scars were fading. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. I looked around my apartment. Small, but mine. It wasn't much, but it was where I had started over. Where I had found myself again. It was a place where I could dream, where I could build, and where I could finally live without the weight of someone else's mistakes holding me down. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I stood up, stretching, and walked over to answer it. Standing there was Emily, her eyes bright, a soft smile on her face. Ready to start planning? She asked, her tone light and playful. I smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through me. Absolutely. As she stepped inside, I realized that this was it, the beginning of something new. Something better. Something mine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I wasn't looking back anymore. I had found my way forward. And that was enough.